Hello, welcome to Chapter 8, Section 1, Inverse Variation. Now, a long time ago, you learned about direct variation, and that looks like this. Y equals A times X. Okay, where A is some number, right? This is direct. Now, today, we're actually going to learn about inverse variation, but we're going to be using inverse and direct, so we're going to have to get familiar with both. But when you think about direct, I want you to think about multiplication. Y equals A times X. And the inverse of multiplication, as we know, is division. So two variables, X and Y, show inverse variation, which is your blank, when they are related as follows. Y equals A divided by X. So instead of multiplying, we're doing the inverse, which is dividing, where A is the constant of variation, that's its name, and Y is said to vary inversely with X. So we need to make sure that we can identify inverse variation versus direct variation, or neither, when we're given an equation. And here's what you do. It's very simple. First, you have to solve for Y. After you've solved for Y, you just have to look at the problem. So, for example, in A, well, in order to get Y by itself, you have to divide by X. So divide by X, and Y equals 17 over X. Well, that is division. That is definitely division. So, it must be inverse, because that is what we just looked at. Now for B, it's already solved for Y. There's nothing we can do. And that looks neither like division or just multiplication. Well, that means that it is neither, and that is possible. And then for this last one, you can also see that Y is not by itself yet. So we need to do something to get Y by itself, and that's get rid of the 10. Well, if you have a number in your denominator, you multiply by that number to get rid of it. So we're going to multiply both sides by 10. So that Y equals, those cancel, 10x. Well, that does not look like division. In fact, it looks like multiplication. So this must be direct variation. And then we're done. So that's how you would describe that, right? You just solve for Y, and then see what your equation looks like. Now, sometimes, if you're given a table, like in example 2, you have to be able to look at the numbers, manipulate them, and see whether it's inverse or direct variation. And from there you could come up with an equation and solve, and you can do a whole bunch of other things, but we have to be able to identify it first. And the way we're going to distinguish between inverse and direct variation is by finding A. Because Y and X, as much as they are important, they don't matter as much as our constant of variation. Our constant of variation and how you get that constant of variation is what matters. So let me show you something. I'm going to take inverse. And I know that inverse is Y equals A over X. And I'm going to solve for A. Okay? I want to solve for A because A is going to tell me whether it's inverse variation or direct variation from a table. So I'm going to multiply both sides by X to get that X times Y equals A. So if you have a table and all of your X's and Y's equal the same A, then it's inverse variation. And you're going to see an example of that. Now, it's not enough to just know inverse variation. You have to know direct as well. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for the direct variation. That's a C. So for direct variation, Y, let's do this here. Y equals AX. So in order to get A by itself, you're going to have to divide by X on both sides. So that my equation that I'm using now for A is A equals Y over X. Now let's use these equations in the following examples. So I'm going to pick one to do first, right? So for this example and for all the others, I'm just going to do inverse first because I can. So you're asking, is this inverse? Well, we can tell by multiplying x and y. If we get the same a every single time, then it is inverse variation. So let's try it. We have x times y, 2 times negative 6. Well, that's negative 12. Okay. Well, what about the next pair? 3 times negative 4. Well, that is negative 12. We're good so far. But we actually have to try every single one. So we have to try 4 times negative 3, which is negative 12. And 6 times negative 2, which is negative 12. So if we look here, they all match. Okay, they all have to match. If one of them is different, it is no longer inverse variation and we have to move on. But this is definitely inverse variation, so that is our answer. Okay, we're just plugging in x and y to find a. Now, I'm going to do the same thing over here. So we're going to try inverse. Well, we have x times y, so 2 times 24. That is 48. Then we have 4 times 16. Well, that is actually 64. And because 48 does not equal 64, automatically, right, that gives us not a constant of variation. It's not constant, which means that that is not inverse variation. So now we have to try to find out if it's direct variation. So I'm going to do the same process, except I'm not using the purple equation, the a equals x times y. I'm using a equals y over x. So direct, possibly. Well, direct variation says that a equals y over x. So we're going to take our y, which is 24, and divide by our x, which is 2. Well, 24 divided by 2 is 12. Okay, let's try the next one, see if it matches. 16 over 4, right? Y over x. Well, that is actually 4, so these do not match. Which means that if neither one works, it is neither. Simple as that. The last thing that you're going to do with inverse variation is be given an x and y and come up with an equation. So write an equation. Now this is inverse variation. So automatically we're using the equation y equals a over x. So we have an x, we have a y. Let's plug them in and find a. Y is 8 when x is 4. Okay, we get that right here. Then we need to solve for a. We need to actually find out what a is. So we're going to multiply both sides by 4 so that a is 32. Now, I'm glad we found a. That is not our answer. We have to write an equation. So we're going to take our a and plug it back in right there. That will be our equation. So y equals 32 over x. That is our equation. That is one part of our answer. However, if you read the instructions, it would say find y when x equals negative 16. So all you have to do, very simple, is take your equation and plug in negative 16 for x. So y equals 32 over negative 16, which is negative 2. So that is our answer. That's all you have to do. Have a nice day.